The Considered Life by Stéphane Boublil. Chapter 14. Art. As an unlikely father of two in so-called modern society, I am, mostly against my will, in constant contact with the object of childhood. From diapers, co-sleepers, and placenta storage bins to primary-colored toys, midget-sized blazers, and sadly interactive books, you know, the ones with built-in finger puppets. We whittle down our selections, little by little, to the objects that perturb least our sense of right and wrong, and hope for the best while shopping the aisles of Toys R Us. But at some point, and I am afraid I may have reached that juncture, we turn around to look over a thoughtfully erected domain and bear witness to the fact that we are but the proud kings of a pile of crap. And not just any crap, but crap often encased in perfectly engineered packaging, which tried its best to convince us that said crap, if nothing else, would elevate our children's brainwaves to unforetold heights. Fact is, when you look around in any store where colorful polymers are celebrated as gods these days, you realize that everything marketed to kids is supposedly educational. Very few packaged toys are ever specifically designed or sold solely for joy anymore, it seems. Yes, joy. Even the Etch-a-Sketch is touted as a dexterity tool. You rarely see ads for kids' products even pretending to merely expand a child's imagination or praise the pleasure of drawing for its own sake. What's that about? Are ideas perceived as dangerous if they are not put to use instantly to the perceived to be loftier goal of intellectual expansion? And why are kids not encouraged, especially at a young age, to simply live out their playful fantasies, to create and experience the value of creativity for its own sake out of whatever they may find? Such freedom is not simply a pedagogic endeavor. It is art. In fact, as the very expression of human imagination, art delightfully serves little purpose but to communicate that which cannot be communicated otherwise. It has tangible use neither for the creator nor the consumer. Its function is opaque and overanalyzed. It is nothing and everything. It is a way, not a destination. But how did we get here? And what place should it have in the considered lives of both the growing and the supposedly grown? One should probably have to define art for oneself first. Art. I am afraid of you. Afraid, for you are no mere act of creation, but a form of judgment as you force me to decide who I am by frowning upon my doodles from the height of your 100,000-year-old throne. Already burdened with complicated matters of self-expression and the communication of intimate emotions to a world less than prepared to receive them, I do not, on top of it, appreciate being reviewed. Afraid because you are essential to my life, able to plunge me into the abysses seldom spelunked of my intentions, inventions, and sparks of imaginations that constitute who I am. You are both scaring and baiting me to express that inner multitude with a few chords on a piano, a few lines on a building, a few colors on a canvas, a few frames on a screen, challenging me to link these parts into a whole. Art, passionate at first, profitable sometimes, boring never. You, to quote Peter Cetera as one periodically must, are the inspiration. Over the years, I have learned to understand my life as a continual work of art, not because of any preordained sanctity or even accredited quality, but rather through the acknowledgement that if I do not willfully pick the notes to arrange in the symphony of my life, they will be chosen by others, by way of habit, history, or force. I am the conductor of this orchestra, the painter of this canvas, the director of this film, and as such, must consider all that populate my life as the crew, the cast, the sets, the special effects, the costumes, the soundtrack that I, following the mind's screenplay, must coordinate to my satisfaction so that the studio may be happy with the first weekend's ticket sales. My life is a work of art because it comes from nothing and goes nowhere fast in the gallery space that is our earth, only for a limited time. So buy now, buy quickly. My life is a work of art, as is yours, for there is no alternative. And so judiciously must we select our forms of expression so that we may be heard, misunderstood, considered, acclaimed, victimized, rich, found, the opposite of ignored. Why is it that every teenager who doesn't know what to do with his or her life yet applies to art school? Always the default choice for those who perceive there are none. Yet, to succeed in art is no picnic in Washington Square Park. It is excessively mystifying and time-consuming, as it has gotten mixed up with money, fame, and one-upmanship to the detriment of itself. New art forms are invented daily. Case in point, you can write down thoughts unrelated, egocentric, salacious, filled with off-center imagery and clever quips, and soon legitimately call it literature. Imagine that. To be fair, angst of any kind has always driven the afflicted to art. But art is not a default. It is a choice. One that requires, if not some understanding of the goal, at least an understanding of the responsibility inherent to inquiry, and the humility needed to start at the beginning. A considered life is one that takes the time to make choices for itself. Art did not used to be like this. It did not used to be thought of as an escape, as an act of rebellion. It used to be the result of spontaneous combustion between philosophy and storytelling, an ever-evolving process of reaching out to the invisible toward which the artist always finds a way. From petroglyphs to graffiti, the artist reacts to confusion, to his or her inability to find an explanation to the questions of life. What? How? And of course, why? Art evokes the mystery without which the world would not exist, as René Magritte was once sure. But what mystery was he talking about? Today, such spontaneous combustion is harder to find because people are constantly retelling the same stories. Concede with me that Avatar was happening but a stone's throw away from Plato's cave, and you will know what I mean. Throughout our quotidian runs to the deli, the mosque, or the French mistress, we seem decreasingly aware of human intellectual achievements. Hence, we are dismissive of the search for their origins. Let me rephrase that. We no longer take the time to observe what around us has become culture, that which would further our understanding of our context and eventually our place within it. Blame this lack of interest on the young? Sure, they're easy to blame, as they too often seem uncurious, uninterested in finding out what lies beyond their particular frames of reference. But whose cue do they choose to either take or leave? Ours, I hesitate to say, the adults. Those who lived before and acquired wisdom and stuff. More often than not, just stuff. And art is stuff, isn't it? Well, American philosopher Albert Hubbard disagreed, saying that art is not a thing. It is a way. And much like language, we tend to hold it up to a higher standard, that which is not merely of an interesting form, but of compelling meaning as well. Why do we value it so much? Because it is a form of communication still undecrypted. Perhaps even indecipherable, and we tend to ascribe beatific qualities to what we do not yet understand, thereby setting it in stone or crosses, when Mr. Hubbard's assertion should be better considered, in that art is not the mystery, not even the cipher, but the language itself. Why indeed create in the first place if it were anything less? Why paint a picture of the tree when it will invariably pale in comparison to the model? Is the artist telling us that there is something more to reality than meets the eye? We always talk these days about how fast the world goes, about how evolution is sped up, about how technology has enabled the human being to do more, faster, if not better. Worn like a badge of honor in cocktail conversations, we feel pride to have been able to recognize said speed increase as we boast to our peers about this unique discovery. Useless happy hour awkward silence fillers aside, is that what we really want? Do we really mean to make the vehicle go so fast that we, its makers, are unable to catch up with our own creation? I doubt it, for we love control too much. But we're so obsessed with triumph and prosperity that we will easily forget the intent, the meaning, the use of such a race. In a way, we use art to slow down. And thank Bauhaus we have artists to give us a break from all the zipping around. Art takes time to mean and be meaningful for others. It holds up a mirror to context. Art, in any of its forms, is never as simply selfish as it sometimes seems to be. At the start of the 19th century, Hegel underlined 5 disciplines worthy of art classification. Those were architecture, sculpture, painting, music, and poetry. Later, the French, who else, added 4 more. The media arts, comprised of photography, television, and radio. The living arts, comprised of dance and theater, film, and graphic novels. So strange to want a list that which is merely a product of intellectual activity addressing the human condition by way of emotion. In fact, I never quite understood the moniker of art school, given so many institutions across the world, for it is rarely taught there. Mere technique is, and thankfully so. If art was ever to be taught, the teacher would have to choose a way, a process, in dramatic opposition to the tentative artist's need to find his or her point of view while meandering, confused, dissatisfied. Even Marcel Duchamp had to, in his words, force myself to contradict myself in order to avoid conforming to my own taste. I encountered this dilemma, as most contestants in the game show of life do, in the 90s when I entered New York University's Tisch School of the Arts in order to study filmmaking. So much was expected of me by my parents, grandparents, and in due course self, namely to be a successful filmmaker. Isn't that the only reasonable outcome to expect when one enters film school? No. As it turns out, it isn't. Why indeed go through the trouble of making art of any kind? Empirically, other than statistically doubtful public notice, it offers little reward. Yet there seems to exist a need to depict one's stories artfully as a basic expression of communication. The very need Richard Prince feels when painting nurses. The very need b-boys felt to pop and lock at the Paradise Garage. The very need Mozart felt when he wrote the Andante in C, his first composition. So if it has been prevalent and unsolicited for the whole of human history, why is being an artist still perceived as a harder life path? What makes it less accepted? Because art is not needed for survival? Why are we persuaded not to become artists by our parents and society at large when art is so applauded and even these days much overcompensated for the few who pass through the needle? To begin to answer these questions, we need to think of art not as something to do, but a form of language. Of artists not as painters, photographers, or dancers, but translators, interpreters of a world that we do not understand, that we perhaps cannot understand. And it seems that learning this language is an individual toil, because, as the cliché often nails, the artist is a lonely character who often needs solitude and brain space in order to create. True of Da Vinci and Pollock, true of Mozart and Prince, true of Wells and Anderson. PT, not Wes. The call to slather one color heretofore unmixed with another, to play notes heretofore unscaled, or to drop 1,000,000 frogs in the middle of a scene is heeded by the same need we had to create the world pre-Buttle, that of create language when the one at present seems to fall short. It is a craft that has evolved over the past millennia, beginning in the era during which the only thing one could think of picturing was what existed. We must be reminded that in ancient civilizations, as in some of today's evangelical circles, gods were not abstract. They were very much perceived to be tangible and were pictured and sculpted as human forms. How indeed could they have painted them any other way? But a switch occurred in visual art, which deemed the representation of reality unsatisfactory in order to guess at what perhaps lay beyond it. That was and is an extraordinary pursuit. You can almost hear Picasso, Monet, or perhaps more to the point Van Gogh, going quite literally mad, realizing that painting what he saw before him could hardly do justice to his intention. And so art took a turn, during which artists looked for ways to transcend what they saw, the physical world, in order to find out if there was something else beyond, something they could feel but could not see. Built in was the original complaint. Why am I wasting my time painting a field? God, for lack of a better idea, did it best out there. What am I doing with my pigments trying to replicate what she did in actuality? Because as amazing as I think I am, the result will invariably pale in comparison. Upon such realization, some painters turned to accounting and others became the realists of the Italian Renaissance. Still, something lagged. So started the idea of abstraction in concrete art. Of course, there were many schools of thought within, starting with Pointillism and moving to Impressionism, to Cubism, from Miro to Yves Klein, by way of Malevich's white on white, a white square on top of a white square. What would people think? What would these artists do next? It is very easy to dismiss the white canvas in a museum, especially if unaware of the painful history of inadequacy it took to get there. How many times have we gone into a modern art museum and flippantly announced to all who would hear it that my kid can do that? And absolutely he can. Your cat can do that simply by not going into an art supply store. But that flippant dismissal disconcertingly ignores the repudiation of the self necessary to accomplish a white canvas, a feat literally beyond words. Take away a painting from its context, and it no longer retains historical significance. Should it matter? Should it not be enjoyed simply on graphic terms? Take Picasso's Guernica, or Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. Meaningful works in large part because of their place in art history, as well as the techniques used. But if you take them out of their context, they lose their meaning. They become merely beautiful. Of course, to ascribe lofty intent to the creators of non-representational compositions is an easy thing to do, since abstraction is open to interpretation and realism seems not. But that is incorrect. Both challenge the watcher in different ways. All art screams, "Hey, you! First realize that you do not know everything. Realize that you cannot see it all. Now look at this." And it asks for you to acquiesce. Is it possible that my eyes deceive me? That I do not have as beautiful a face as I think I do? Is it possible that in another dimension my face is squared with a profiled nose? Malevich, Picasso, and many of their friends and followers say, yea, that none of what we see is true, that it is all an illusion, all a dream. That is why Malevich paints a white canvas, Klein a blue one, and each artist communicates his and her singular variation on the same theme, which is for us to move along, that there is, quite literally, nothing to see here. They each tell us that we indeed are the blind ones, we, driven by success and achievement. Contrary to us, their own noble, if perhaps futile quest has nothing to do with finding and delivering solutions, merely that this is the way they see the world around them, so as to hopefully spark an unstoppable chain of thoughts within our own skulls, which should result in an opinion about how we see our world. Would that not be a substantial principle to teach our children, instead of overpraising rainbow-colored plastic usefulness? This is the way I am wired. How are you wired? How do you see life? This is how I live based on my knowledge of my life. This is how I conduct my life as art. Now, you may not agree with everything or anything I am saying, with my opinions about art, death, love, children, or education spread over these pages. But do they shake you enough? Make you mad enough to question the same received ideas and arrive at different answers? Mad enough to arguably disagree? Mad enough to spend a little time on an investment you can never regret? That is exactly what art does. Art challenges us in every museum, spray-painted on every street corner, in our own homes, challenging us to question ourselves. Mimicking the ferociously syntaxed language of art is what finally convinced me that I could create my own and invent, unencumbered by worries of failure that would come soon enough, the language of design I most felt was appropriate when starting the apartment, an experiment in storytelling more so than in business, something I still know criminally little about. As one of the earthly products that, together with real estate, is traded from person to person in the most costly way, you have to wonder why, in a world in which we are still wrestling with global debt, disease, and a deficit of clean water, art is meeting with such commercial success when its true intentions lie, more nobly, above the radar. It is because it is not only one of the world's most intense commodities, but in fact, the great questioner. The questions it begs us to ask ourselves and others are not meant to lead to answers, rather simply to register wonder. Can you ever be wrong or sure about what a work is intended to symbolize? It's easy to look at the title or the artist's biography to try and grasp at the purpose, but more to the point, is a piece of visual art even to be defined by its maker? What about those who fake depth in order to appear more challenging than they actually are, producing work that is intentionally obscure and controversial? If I see another multimedia installation depicting an oversaturated naked woman standing among a ravaged forest of discolored bunnies raping stacks of dollar bills with a sticky bun in one hand and the other bleeding in stigmata, I am going to buy a cat and skin it, alive, in front of its cubs, or whatever they're called. Do we, the viewers, not bear a responsibility to add our worldviews, our interpretations, our layers upon the work? Point is, who should we listen to? There are magazines, galleries, friends, art advisors, people everywhere telling us left, right, and middle what is supposed to be good and not, what is so hot right now, what we definitely need in our collection, what we have to know about. Well, in art, much like in life, it is important to get away from this binary paradigm of good and bad that time and time again has proven to be too dependent on specific context to be of real general value. Opinions about any object need personal consideration to be adequately formed, and once they are, must be understood to be valid at best for the subject alone. There is no such thing as good and bad in art, at least not as much as the auctioneers would have us believe it. There is no such thing in architecture. There is no such thing in people. All there can be is a possible agreement between disparate opinions that is so widespread as to be considered popular. All there really is, in the beginning and end, is what it means to you. And once again, what it means to you is solely predicated on what you mean to yourself first, and how well you understand yourself. And if you are just starting on this journey, the answer to that question must be, so far, not very much, because you have not completed much homework yet. You have not put in the time. It is one thing to be viscerally attracted to a piece of art, but such instinct should be solely treated as a wonderfully necessary stepping stone on which to build the road to self-discovery. Yet, beware, for as much as it would be easy to say, cool, I'm going to take this book, The Considered Life, and use this dude's opinions as my stepping stone to understanding, I would reply, get the fuck out of my office. You're not going to be able to use this or any other book for your own discovery. It is only supposed to ring the alarm in your head with a principle, a method worth applying. Its dogma, my dogma, is worthless to you. There's a good reason the aisle is called self-help, after all. And so it is with art, within the fold of which your instincts awaken a part of you with the understanding that it is a first step, which may be your introduction to your true self. Do not simply treat instinct as a stranger, as an external process, as in, oh, this painting's amazing. It's not the painting. It is that you find it amazing that is worth of attention. When you start considering your life, and you start to deconstruct all of these small processes that led to your off at that piece of sullied, stretched burlap on the wall, you can go further and scare yourself into understanding the patterns of your likes and dislikes, where you begin and eventually where you end. You may see a different person than you had surmised based on the opinions of others, maybe more thoughtful, a lot less conservative, a lot more conservative perhaps. Wealth, the way you were brought up, a formal education, whether your grandparents hugged you enough have all contributed to how you perceive yourself today, which is actually who you think you are. Art can break or comfort you in that feeling of supposed knowledge, and it is possible you were right all along about yourself. But I would venture not. Sure, you might be the exception, one of the few who have been awake all this time, but the rest of us remain unchallenged about who we are, an opportunity art can help fulfill because artists question themselves as an instinctual response to their malaise on our behalf. The artist's intention is to feel unease, to precipitate a seizure that yells in 1,000 stories, colors, and notes, I will not participate in the gameless hunt. I will not run in this race. I am going to stop now and draw, photograph, sing, and see where my brain may lead me, as opposed to our daily quest for comfort. And when a thing is finally produced, we, the consumers of such things, attempt the deconstruction of the finished product in a bid to understand the turmoil, the joy, the bitterness, the love, the indignation, the anger, the yearning, the compassion that went into it, in order first to react and then hopefully create an emotion of our own. Fucking brilliant. And a fucking handy way to realize that artists are just like us, sifting through the confusion, wandering with paint, music, and light. They are us. It is just that their toolbox looks different. We need to stop putting labels on people based on their activity, too often thinking that artists are another species. I always hear people who look at the products of art make excuses for their own lack of understanding, and there is little, other than overcooked linguine, that makes me yell out loud in public places more. They say, well, I'm not an artist, but I like it. Or, I don't have an artistic bone in my body, but is it that they have not been acknowledged by a committee of their peers that would have given them the right to an opinion over a part of their life they do not participate in? Where does this need for pre-acceptance come from? Is it that they have never dared peer into that side of themselves and hence feel no right to a justifiable perspective? Where does that embarrassment come from? I think simply that people do not try. People do not willfully put themselves in a position of discomfort where there can be no assurance or control over the feelings that pop out. Just because we have been bred as a species for whom lack of self-esteem is a major societal trait, we give up and outsource to the mysterious ones who must know, who have, we guess, the ability to tell us what a piece of art does or means. That assumption is a very large and stratified pile of dung. As a society, we admire artists because they chant high on the roofs of their ambitions that they will forego the routine, safety, and dental insurance that a job provides, to go search for something that does not quite fit within otherwise perceived reality, that they are willing to risk it all for this supposedly ethereal reward. But apart from Dali, they do not possess magical powers. They are not wizards able to see past our crude dimension into another and see the world as it is not. They are merely questioners. Everyone has the inner strength and will to experience the world in the same way they assume an artist does. Talent, in fact, is a separate issue. Talent is irrelevant. Talent, or the perceived lack thereof, is the one component, in fact, that will shame us into not boarding this train. When talent only ever matters at the destination, on Judgment Day, and art is, if nothing else, about the paths we choose to get there. So many routes, backroads, and highways, each with a different point of view of the world, each with a different speed limit, each with a different exit. When we choose music, movies, or German deconstructionism, our outlook is either changed or confirmed through the generosity of another who dared look into the invisible. Little Billy Shakespeare once spoke of the object of art as being to give life a shape, a worthy mission in and of itself, true of most trades, if practiced with consideration. If art is indeed a language, talent is certainly not required for competent expression. We know that thanks to the E! Entertainment Network. And so we are all able to take this journey into the unknown. Yet we rarely do because of such misplaced reverence. A sad waste. Love has a way of getting us there. Whether it is love for another person, love for an object, love for anything that moves us. My cousin Nicholas once asked me if Gina, then my girlfriend, moved me. And I did not really have to answer that question. I said yes, thoughtlessly. Now I understand being moved as a combination of love, respect, appreciation, friendship, plus a little something you do not quite understand that makes your eyes all glassy when you think about that other person, that makes you feel invulnerable when faced with odds not quite in your favor, that narrows your focus down to the one that defines all else. That could be called love. Today, I can categorically say that yes, Gina moves me. In the same way, what makes it important for us to live considered lives and why art plays a momentous role in starting us on that journey is that very moment when you see a piece that moves you and you do not understand why. It may start out of aesthetic appreciation, perhaps even historical respect, but then you encounter that little something extra that somehow pumps your heart a wee bit faster, gives your whole body goosebumps, pushes out viscous liquid from the corner of your eyes. You must take advantage of that moment. That is your invitation to the meal you might not have tasted had you not recognized it. That is a magic moment, a recognition the artist has pushed you toward, to get you to a place where a spark flies inside the brain and you too can finally understand that there is something you cannot understand. The circle is complete. You are now an artist. Now, pick your language. But what if you engage and you do not measure up to your own expectations? Once the invitation has been sent and the table set, it is entirely likely that between you and your hopes lies an abyss that you will fill with excuses, mostly pertaining to your apparent lack of talent. Surely it's part of it. It would be tough to make the case that the difference between you and Chuck Close is not, to a certain extent, a matter of talent. But I will attempt to blame what I will simply call a lack of imagination. The fact is that talent, as heralded as it might be in the backstages of galleries and award shows, is, I believe, but the second and practical phase of the creative process. First must come imagination, resources of which I am afraid seem scarcer these days than even unobtainium. Case in point, it finally dawned on me in my own creative practice that so much time was taken in supposedly creative meetings to compare and contrast our supposedly new designs with ones existing that we often never thought to circle back to imagination as a means of idea production. Ironically, a lot of those meetings, including some I have led, saw ambitious originality as the goal to attain, or at the very least, aspire to. As you are tasked to launch a car that does not yet exist, as we were for the Infiniti Company, what else but imagination can serve to inflame the hearts of those present in the unveiling of nothing by offering a visual and musical poem about the beautiful importance of human travel? Otherwise, sadly more often than not, we will merely repeat words that we believe have great impact, or if they do not, will at least do a great job of making others believe they do. Words like unique, solutions, edgy, revolutionary, thought leadership, meaning, value, unexpected, truth, experiential, new, paradigm, box, inside or outside of it, depending on what sounds better at the time, shifting conversations. It's not about something, it's about something else. And more that I really do not have time to catalog, as I have to dedicate some hours convincing my son of the inherent coolness of Quinlan Vos, the little-known Cathar Jedi Master. Point is, for it is about time to come to one, that I wish we use a lot more of our lives to connect to our ability to form new ideas, images, or concepts of external objects not present to the senses. Actually, the dictionary definition of imagination, which I cowardly copied and pasted. Something people with none will literally do to bolster the claims they have no clue how to back up themselves. But then, why would imagination be valuable if all we did was simply climb upon the shoulders of those who came before us, only to twist a bit of ourselves into the mix and then deceptively call it our own? Why adopt their results and not the principles that led to admire them in the first place? Well, art is supposed to be a natural recipient for imagination. But in antiquity, people had little use for aspiring to a concept as self-determined as imagination, since all inspiration came from otherworldly muses. Calliope inspired epic poets. Clio took care of history. Erato, lyrical poetry. Euterpe was the musician, no doubt still currently in touch with the Gaga. Melpomene was in charge of drama, also in touch with the Gaga. Polyhymnia of writing and pantomime. Terpsichore was the dancer. Thalia the comedian. And finally Urania inspired astronomers. Greeks thought of nightly dreams as these muses' opportunity to dispense orders for the day to come, and when awake took their to-do list to the people. In that case, imagination was simply thought of as a dictating superior in the hierarchy of life. Now it is much more romantic. With imagination, we can once again believe ourselves to be the holders of small truths, which might, together, be used to bring about a new era of self-consideration during which we may no longer hold ourselves to our words, but to our actions. Be responsible for bringing about the change we want to see in the world. Not my words. Never again count on others' abilities or willingness to create more, nay better. We are at our own mercy, my good people, so that we may once again, if ever we were, be the creatures we always hoped we would be. Tall, proud, effective, and most importantly, deaf and blind to the distractions of the world. There is no reason, no excuse, no more purpose for delaying the use of our heretofore underestimated superpower than there is to reward the Black Eyed Peas for their unfathomable boom boom pow. Unless it is, in both cases, to needlessly encourage mediocrity to the glory of imagination's archenemy, comfort. And so here we are, awake and ready to fight our way back from the daily sleepiness of our lives with, in our arsenal, the most powerful weapon evolution has seemed fit to equip us with. We have always had the ruby slippers on our crooked feet. All we ever had to do was tap our heels 3 times, if you need that sort of mnemonic device, and imagine what the creation should be. It is your responsibility. It is your duty. It is the way out of here. Imagination holds the key. Use it unsparingly.